Hi, this is Swapnil. We are here at KubeCon and CloudNativeCon in Barcelona, Spain, and today we have with us Bassam Tabbara. You are founder and CEO of Upbound.
That's right.
So first of all, this name Upbound, what does it mean?
Honestly, we were looking for a name that kind of signifies doing something with cloud computing, and we thought part of the thing that got us excited is how to rise above the clouds, do things above the clouds. And so we were looking for a name that was in the general direction of up, and landed on Upbound, which is, aspirational, but also implies a direction that goes above. And that's how we landed on it. So
That's a good story about the name. But what do you guys do?
what did we do? We're essentially building a new cloud computing platform that lets people run their services and applications and scale them and manage them across different cloud environments. So you write your applications and services once and you run them on our platform, and we take care of running, deploying, and managing them on the different cloud providers, whether they're public cloud providers or they're hybrid clouds environments.
And tell us a bit about your platform.
So we're essentially, we're an open source platform. We're based on a lot of open source technologies like Kubernetes. We have a project called Crossplane. We use a project called Rook that we started, and a ton of other projects that are part of our platform here. One of the things that we look at is essentially doing, a majority of our work in the open and building what we'd like to think is the next open cloud computing platform. Our part of our mission is to open up cloud computing. We feel like the last 10 years of cloud computing have all been about proprietary clouds, and we think that the next 10 years should be more about open clouds. So that's the base of our platform. We don't have a product in market yet. We're leading with a bunch of open source projects, but we hope to essentially arrive at our commercial offering around this early next year.
Right. And you said opening up the cloud.
Yeah.
If you look at most of the cloud native technologies are kind of open source, all the way from OpenStack, or when you look at CNCF projects. So where do you see the proprietary angle which you are trying to solve?
Yeah, that's a good question. So if you look at the CNCF landscape and you look at the project we have, like I said, one of our projects is a CNCF project, Rook, and so if you look at those, the majority of them are essentially either runtimes, container orchestration frameworks like Kubernetes, or storage technology, or networking, or service meshes, and all those things, right? But if you look at each of the cloud providers, the heart of a cloud provider, the things that you actually put together as a cloud platform, is all closed source. So if you go to we can pick any of the cloud providers, they're all do the same thing. If you go to AWS, and you call an API on AWS and say, I want to deploy a database, or I want to deploy a VM, or run a container service, you're talking to a control plane that is essentially managing the deployment and provisioning and lifecycle management of the resources that you're doing. That control plane, the API, and everything around it is closed source, despite the fact that they use open source technologies for running some of their managed services, like a managed Kubernetes service or a managed database service that runs MySQL or Postgres. Everything else in terms of cluster management and a control plane and everything else is a closed system. So we think that there needs to be a more open approach to running a cloud environment that goes beyond just the runtimes and storage technologies and platform software, but also includes the control plane and API of the cloud and everything else that makes up a cloud environment. So that's the part that we focus on. So one of our projects that we are excited about is a project called Crossplane. It's an open source project that essentially is an open source control plane for cloud environments. So it lets you create a control plane and run a control plane that it can orchestrate work across clouds and acts as a central point of orchestration, coordination across different cloud environments. And if you look at that work, it's essentially the central piece of any new or any cloud platform. And that's, so that's how we define a more open environment in cloud computing.
So that really doesn't matter whether in whatever environment you're running, you have your control that is totally open, right, and you have control over it instead of using a proprietary piece of code.
That's right. So everything from, if you think about the path of using a cloud provider, you're typically start by calling some API, using a management console or using CLI to provision infrastructure on a given cloud provider. And the things that you actually provision might be based on open source software or not. But that whole path leading up to the running of resources and infrastructure in cloud, that whole path is typically all closed source and proprietary. And it's very different between cloud providers and cloud platforms, right? And so part of what we are trying to do is a community-driven effort around creating an open source control plane that standardizes on a common API and a common set of orchestration, common set of management software around cloud computing. Right. And we think that the timing is right for essentially doing that, and we think that we essentially are building on the momentum and all the wonderful adoption of things like Kubernetes and everything else that's happened in the space.
And tell us a bit about your other project, Rook.
Rook is a storage orchestrator. So it's essentially within a Kubernetes cluster, it's able to orchestrate the running of storage systems so that they have a high level of automation when they're running within the cluster. So for example, we orchestrate things like Ceph, which is an open source storage system, or EdgeFS, or NFS, now Cassandra and Minio, and others coming, such that they can essentially run with a high degree of automation in a Kubernetes cluster and offer storage services to other applications running within that cluster. So it's a popular project, has a ton of momentum around it, a very amazing community building around it, and now is used by all these different companies in production state and used by all these platform vendors to essentially run storage. So if you're running a private cloud or you're running kind of Kubernetes on-premise, it ends up being a really good solution for storage for that environment.
And are these projects like part of CNCF, or you're still maintaining them?
Rook is a CNCF project. It's at the incubation stage, and there's a number of maintainers on the project. I'm still a maintainer on the project. And we have maintainers from other companies and other that are involved in Rook. The same is true for Crossplane. Crossplane is an open source project and it's community driven. And so, yeah, we think that open source projects should all be kind of have a strong governance and are kind of community driven by a community of folks around them.
What are the prerequisites, or what are the requirements that this project will, once it's in incubation, it will eventually graduate also? So are there any certain criteria that you have to meet, or
to become an incubation project at the CNCF?
And not an incubation, then also like move forward and eventually graduate.
Technically the criteria, there's CNCF sets a criteria for those, and it's mostly around production usage and maturity of the project, and the maturity of the community around the project. And so, Rook went through the different phases, and it's probably ready now for a graduation. And so we're going to start that process soon. But yeah, it's mostly, you can look at it as, how mature is the project measured by production user adoption, and how healthy is the community around the project. those two criteria are primarily what influences projects getting into the CNCF.
So you mentioned that one of the criteria is that production usage for being graduating. So are there any customers who are using either of these two projects?
There are lots of customers using the Rook project in all sorts of environments and different sizes and different deployments. Crossplane is a newer project, so we just released version 0.2, but it's getting a ton of traction even at this level. This morning we announced that we showed off a demo where you can take GitLab. We've been working with them on this, where GitLab, which is a really amazing CI/CD framework and a source control repository and a project management system, and we are able to, through Crossplane, deploy it on different cloud environments and still use all the fully managed services provided by those environments, and do it all from the Kubernetes API and from essentially kubectl. And so we've been working with this on this for a few months, and we're at a point now where it can actually take a production-ready environment like GitLab and run it on these different cloud environments through something like Crossplane.
I'll quickly touch upon GitLab. Why did you choose GitLab? You did touch upon some core point, but...
Yeah, so GitLab is interesting because one, they're a super successful project and company around it. And they have 100,000 enterprise deployments of GitLab. So they're, quite, and it's a really representative service and application that we want to run on this kind of platform. So it kept us honest. We learned a lot doing the work, all the work that went back into Crossplane. But the other part is that they also share the mission of, and the vision of essentially getting to a world that has a more open cloud computing platform and that enables you to run on multiple clouds or hybrid clouds. So from that perspective, we share a vision of where things are going. And the cool thing about their DevOps and auto DevOps environment is that it's one of the only ones that's built to run on multiple clouds. And so there's a ton of synergy around kind of where we think the world is going with cloud computing.
And we are here at KubeCon.
Yeah.
This is the first day, things are still kicking off. What has been your experience, so far, or what you look forward to? What are you excited about?
I think this is going to be a really interesting KubeCon. I think it's the largest one. They're expecting a record audience here. I'm really looking forward to talking to our community around our projects. I'm looking forward to talking to our customers. We have a bunch of events happening and a bunch of things all happening at once. So really looking forward to interacting with everyone. I think of these as really concentrated and powerful networking events where you get to meet all the folks that you see in the virtual world. You actually can interact with in person. So that's why I come here.
Thank you, Bassam, for talking to me today. And I look forward to seeing you again because you have a lot of good ideas to open up the cloud, and we'll see your Upbound journey.
Great. Awesome. Thank you. Yeah.